And we are live, and why is my. There it is. Gotta love when the computer starts to act slow.
Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Paranormal Versus. I'm joined tonight by Michael Kopf and our guest Dave Emmons. Now, for some of our regular viewers, you might notice that we're missing a face here. Kell, she can't be with us tonight. There's a bit of a family crisis going on and they're relying on Kell to sort everyone out. So she's unfortunately busy doing that. So we'll give her a wave and say, I hope everything's okay. And hopefully next time she can be on the show. Right then, so tonight, as I said, we've got Dave Emmons. Now, Dave is quite a well-known character in the whole sort of UFO phenomenon. He's also got his own show on YouTube, and he's got some very interesting stories too. He's an author. He's got a couple of books out there. And I think without further ado, if we can let Dave sort of take over and just tell us a little bit about himself and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, Dave, take it away.
Okay. All right, starting from the beginning, I guess after high school, I went into the military, and I was a combat veteran there as a platoon sergeant. I come out and I played music for 45 years, and I worked other jobs, went to night school, and in journalism. I got my background in journalism. That's what got me into writing, actually, finally, in my later stages of life. And I was a manager, a business owner, and at the end of all this, I thought, well, I'll start writing. So I wrote, and I've written 3 books, and this is my first one, the one we're going to talk about today. Cool. They, What Do They Want? And that's by Hangar One Publishing. And also wrote another book. It's Angels and Supernatural Entities. I wrote a book about the war, but we're not going to talk about that. I talked to the host here that I said I don't want to get into politics or anything. So, but I did write this book too, Senseless Wars and Conflicts. So I got into book writing, got into podcasting, and I'm finishing up a sci-fi book. So I'm going the opposite way now. I'm combining everything that I know that's factual into something that's sci-fi and put it all together. Like a E.T. and a human guy gets married and they have a baby and she teaches him how to be a hero, and he becomes a hero and fights the underground ETs, like the reptilians and the greys that are some of our evil enemies. And actually, a humanoid ET is they don't like us either. There's a planet they come from. They're here. They walk amongst us. So I've seen a few of them. But no, that's been my life, and now I keep really busy at being an old guy. So and I'm doing shows like this with you guys, and this is something that I wanted to do. I feel I'm compelled to do it, because something inside me tells me to get out there and reach as many people as you can about the truth about UFOs and ETs, and also the truth about other things in which I talk about, not on this show, but maybe certain other shows I might talk about. But the world is in chaos, and the UFOs that we see now, or they call them UAPs, there's so many of them now. They're showing up, so that tells us something's going on this planet that they know about. There's chaos and there's things going on that might be happening in the near future. So that concerns me too. And that's what I want to reach out and talk to people about. That it's not going to be the ETs that are going to destroy us. If the ETs are involved, it's going to be a false flag situation set up by the New World Order or whatever. But that's as far as I'll go on that. But No, I guess Kell contacted me originally, and she's not here. So just want to say hi to her and thank her for contacting me. And then Michael, yeah, thanks for keeping in touch with me there too. And I guess what is it? Is it Matt?
It's Matt. Yeah.
Matt, yeah. And I want to thank all of you guys for inviting me. The UK, I've been on UK, I guess, podcast and radio before, and I've had several guests from the UK. So I got some strong ties with UK people. So this makes me feel comfortable being with you chaps.
Good.
Well, good.
Yeah.
I have to say, when I was reading your bio, there was a couple of things that jumped out at me, and I was like excited that you were coming on to get your take on. But before we get into that, I'm curious with you talking about the increase of the UFO UAPs. Do you follow the kind of guidelines that people say if it's triangular, that's ours, like deep state technology that's been reverse made, or are you one of those that says, I don't know if that's a true way to distinguish ours versus theirs?
Well, it is true. CGI is our most biggest pain. I think people make up these UFO pictures and videos, and a lot of CGI is actually diluting the truth and hurting people like myself. I've seen 6 up close UFOs, and no, these close up UFOs started back in '63 and '64, 1963, 1964 for me. So that technology wasn't really back engineered until maybe a little later than that. We don't really know how long they had this technology, our people, our militaries, and our political leaders, but I think it's been at least 60 years, and they're 60 years ahead of us, and we don't even know it. But no, I think you can tell the difference between, I saw a large triangle craft, and we'll start backwards and go forwards, I guess, a large triangle craft in 2011. And I was talking to my brother on the phone, and I saw 2 bright white lights coming towards me from the north. And I just lived about 3 or 4 houses down from my mom, and 2 of my brothers were there at the house at that time. So I told my brother I was talking to, I said, I'm going to have to, I'm from 11 siblings, so big family. But I told him, I said, I'm looking at something, I'm going to have to put down the phone. Of course, it wasn't a camera phone. It was one of those remote phones that you use out of your house. So I set it down and I watched this thing. It come towards me. Then I saw a huge triangle craft. It was a kind of like dark metallic gray, and it was coming about 30 miles an hour, 35 miles an hour, very slow and very low. And then it come towards me, and I saw the underneath side of it. It passed right over me. The center went right over me. I was standing in my driveway and I was looking up. It was about 8:30 in the evening. And I looked up and I saw this thing. It was so huge. It covered 8 houses. It covered our whole street. And our street was a dead end street. So it just covered our whole street. There were about 8 or 9 houses. And I looked up and I saw the 2 bright lights on either end of the back end. And then in the middle, I saw a large, it looked like it's 30, 40 foot like a barbecue grill, like it had slats in it. I could hear a whistling or a sound coming out of it. That had to have been some kind of event. I saw a red light in the middle of the 2 white lights in the back. And then as I looked up further, I saw a groove that went down the center of it. It was kind of maybe several foot deep groove that went down the center. And I looked in the front. And this is the most curious thing that I noticed that I never heard before. I saw 2 globes that were glass looking. They were actually glass. They had to be another material, but there was 2 of them hanging down in the front nose, where usually the bright light is in the front, but they didn't have the bright light on in the front. So these 2 globes must have represented that power or that light energy that they emit. So they were about 15 feet long, about 5 or 6 feet wide. There's 2 of them in the nose. And I said, that's weird. And it was passing over. I was in kind of like shock and awe, even though I've seen 4 or 5 UFOs before that, but this one was so huge. I mean, it was just kind of took my breath, and I watched as it went over, and it skimmed the tree across the street at a neighbor's house. and it just brushed the top of the tree. That's how low it was. It was only about 35 feet up, very low. So that couldn't have been one of ours, because something that large would require a lot of energy to give it the lift to stay at that low at 30 feet and only travel about 35 miles an hour. So I knew that wasn't one of ours. That couldn't have been. It's too far advanced. It's too slow. It was so huge. It went over. But I called my mom immediately and I said, "Hey, Mom, did you guys see this?" And she goes, "See it?" She was 85 at the time. And she said, "See it? My God." She said, "It was big." She said, "I was afraid to go outside on the porch because she said I might get abducted." I said, so she's had ET experiences, and her and I talked. Matter of fact, I'm going to put her on the show. She's 96 now, and I want to talk to her about her ET experiences. And that'd be very curious. But she told me, she said, "Oh my God, yes." And my two brothers were there. They saw it too, and they said, "Oh my God, it's so huge." I said, "Yeah." She said, "It passed right over us." I said, "Well, Mom, it passed." I said, the one side of the triangle passed over you, but I said I was standing right dead in the center of it because it passed right over me, dead center, and I could see right up underneath the craft. So it covered 9 houses. It's how big it was, a whole street, and it was huge, and it just went away, disappeared in the clouds as I watched it just go up and out. It was gone, and so that was a sighting in 2011. I called the sheriff's department, and I got a hold of the 911 operator, and I said, "Has any officer seen a large triangle-shaped craft in the area, like in Godfrey or wherever?" And she goes, "No." And I said, "You're probably laughing at me." She goes, "No, we're not." She said, "I got 2 officers standing right here in the room, and they're looking at her, and they're saying they've seen them. They've seen things before." And so she said, "No, we believe you, Mr. Emmons. We're not laughing at you." And she said, "Well, we haven't had any reports yet." And she said the officers said that they have seen that type of craft also as they're going around on the patrols at night. Normally, these UFOs or UAPs, as they want to call them, I don't like calling them that.
No.
They usually show up about between it, when it starts getting dark, as it's getting dark, about 7:30 in the evening, up to about 8:30 in the evening, 9 o'clock is when they appear mostly. That's when I hear a lot of people say that they've had their sightings. So it must be they try to go in the undercover of the darkness, and they either have their lights on where you can't see what they are, but they're dark metallic. And if they're in a cloud, if they're in a storm cloud, in which it was a little cloudy that night, you can't really make out, what color it is, because it's dark gray. That's what I saw, metallic. But I didn't see the top of it. I didn't see the side of it either. Since it was so huge, I'd have to be standing about 3 or 4 houses to the right of me or left of me to see the top of it. I didn't see the top at all. I saw the total underbelly of it. And that was that experience in 2011. It's actually April 9th. I don't usually forget those things. So, and I felt I felt some kind of a strange energy when it passed over me. And I just had run into E.T. human just, I'd say, 5 months before that. And actually, this I'll get into some of my juicier stories for you guys since we got about an hour, because I can ramble on for 3 or 4 hours. The book has a lot of information and a lot of experiences that I'm still having experiences, and they're kind of like paranormal experiences, but they're also, if people have heard of TI, that's a targeted individual.
Yeah.
If you're an influencer, if you're at any level influencer and you speak to people, scientists, whatever, they're going to track you. I'm sorry, I have to say that. I actually got a video out on Facebook that talks about being a TI, being a targeted individual. And I just had an incident just 2 weeks ago of a guy watching me and following me. And and this was the first time I ever come face to face with somebody that was driving a white Ford truck. And I don't know who this guy is. If he's listening to me now, I saw you. And so when I passed him he was looking at me in the back of my complex, and then he was watching me, and I was wondering, that's weird. He's sitting out there by himself off the side of the road watching me. And I said, that is really, I kept an eye on him, and I took off. I was going to go pick up my brother. Apparently, he heard my phone conversation with my brother, and he knew what time and he knew what direction I was going to go. So I went out to the stop sign from the road that leads out to the 2-lane highway, and I made a right turn, and there he was, sitting on the side of the road, like watching me. And I drove by him real slow and almost stopped, and I looked him dead in the face, like saying, I know you're following me. So I took off and went to turn left to the highway, interstate, and he was following me. And I thought to myself, okay, here we go. We're going to have a battle royale here. But he took off the other direction. He went straight north, and I turned because he knew I was on to him. So if they're, I guess what they're hiding and they're trying to be secretive, if their secret is given away and you know who they are, they're going to stop. They're going to break off. They may have somebody else do that, but they do that to a lot of people. I was talking to Kathleen Martin, and she says, yes, I told her there's two types of men in black. There's one that is ET, and I think our people copied off of them or back engineered their tactics and what they do. And we have now, they don't dress in black hardly anymore. They dress like we do, just normally. They might just wear a t-shirt or Levi's. And so they do follow people, even though they don't have black suits. They are still kind of considered the men in black.
That's funny, because I was literally just going to ask you that question. Do you think they are the new men in black? Strange. Going back to the incident that happened when you saw that huge triangular craft go over where you were, right. Was it emitting any noise? Did it make a sound? And could you feel any heat coming from it from where you stood?
No heat, but I heard a hissing sound coming out of those grates, and that I was saying that was the ventilation, and that the heat that whatever their power generator that was putting out, we don't know exactly what kind of energy they're using. I know it's they got a anti-magnetic drive, that's for sure, that they use, but this was making a hissing sound. This is the first craft out of the 6 up close I've seen. This is the first one I heard. It made a little hissing sound. It wasn't very loud. You had to listen to it closely. It was just hissing out of those vents. That's the only sound I heard, and that's why I know it's not one of ours. It just didn't.
Wow. Yeah. Now, if we can go back as well to the bit where you were touching, where you'd met some extraterrestrials before, humanoid extraterrestrials.
Right. Well, this was one of my the triangle craft and the other 5 craft are the tops of my stories in my book, but there is one story that is actually at the very top story in my book, and the chapter is a little bit longer than the rest of them. And I was told by the publisher to break the book down into experiences or different, the different stories, and go from beginning to end. They made me rewrite because I had it in a journal, like a ledger form book, and I wrote it like that. They said, no, put the stories all together. Don't say this happened then go up to the. But here's what happened on October 4th, and I had a spiritual guide. She was a Native American spiritual guide. She told me I would meet this person on October 4th. She didn't know I was traveling. I was going to Sedona, Arizona from Illinois. She didn't know I was traveling. And she said, are you going to take a trip? I said, yes, starting in about 8-9 days, I'm going to take off to Sedona. And she goes, because you're going to meet your first ET on October 4th. I said, no, I've already met my first ET. I said in 95, face to face. And she goes, well, you're going to meet an ET that day. So when I took off, I got there in Sedona on October 4th, and I wasn't trying to push the date or do the date. Like she said, I just went on my merry way and left when I was going to, and I drove there, and I rested before I took off and visited the town. I went to a kind of an Indian jewelry shop. It's they sell necklaces and things of that nature. And I talked to the ladies there, and I bought a few trinkets to take home. And they told me they saw a UFO at Cathedral Rock the night before. I said, oh, wow, I know where that's at. I'm heading that way right now. So I went there, and it was kind of like foggy, not foggy, but it was cloudy that day, a little cool for Sedona, and just a few little sprinkles every now and then. But I went there and got my Sony cam out, and I started recording. I parked in the parking lot there, and I started recording. And in behind me pulls up this little white car. And I looked around and I saw this gal. She was probably about in her 30s, 35, and she was Japanese. And she wore a real slim sweater, a real light sweater, white, and she wore denims in which she had a mud splash on her left leg in her calf area. And I looked at her and I took my camera and I filmed her a little bit. I asked her, I said, "Are you here meeting somebody?" She goes, "No." And I said, you gonna go on the hike or trail?" I said, "Look," I looked up and I said, "Looks like it's gonna rain." I said, "It's sprinkling a little bit off and on." And she goes, "No." And I said, "Oh, okay. You're gonna meet somebody." She goes, "No, I'm supposed to meet you." She said, "We were supposed to meet." I looked at her and I said, "I don't know you, do I?" She goes, "No." I said, "You know me?" She goes, "Yes, I know you." And I said, "Wow." I sent chills up my spine. I thought, wow, and being a combat veteran, of course, I'm hyper alert on certain things. And I kind of took her as being, when she looked at me, she had really dark, piercing eyes. And she was attractive, a gal in the 30s and Japanese. And some guy said, "Well, Dave, that was a romantic interlude." I said, "No." I said, "After all this was all done, it was more of a father-daughter meeting." And so I told her, I said, "Well, you want to get in my car?" I said, "It's kind of cool, and you're not wearing many clothes." And so she said, "Yes." So we got in the car, and next to me pulled in another white car, and it had a guy in there in his upper 20s, and he had a kind of a close cropped haircut, and he had a kind of a headphone on. And I was wondering who this guy was. He didn't look at me. Normally, regular people will look around. They'll look around where they're at. He didn't. He didn't turn his head, and I kept watching him. He didn't turn his head one time to look at me or anything. And I looked over at her, and I didn't say much at that time. We started talking, and she said she couldn't read English, but she can talk it. And she says she knows 20 languages. I said, "Oh, wow, you must be super smart." And she just looks at me. She goes, "Yeah." And I said, and she asked me to read something that was on a chain or a locket. And I actually give her one, a chain, a little crystal. And I said, "Here, you got to have a souvenir from Sedona." And she asked me to read what was on the paper. And so I read it to her, and I looked at her kind of weird. And I said, "You know 20 languages, but you can't read?" Apparently she must have been reading symbols or whatever. And so I just, as we talked, I think she kept talking to me she said about her parents not treating her right. And I looked, I'm hearing background noises.
Yeah, me too.
Oh, sorry, it's my dogs and there's thunder.
Okay, I was just a little worried that maybe they're watching us now.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah, we've been talking.
Oh, okay. But no, she kept asking me emotional type questions because that's where I got most of my information from the little red flags that were jumping up every time she'd ask me a question. She said, "What would you do if you were at a place of employment? You had a person that you work with, a workmate, who constantly gave you trouble." I said, "Well, I'd have to have some kind of peace with her." I said, "Because if you're fighting on the job, you both will get fired." I said, "I wouldn't do that." I said, "Just tell your piece and make peace and go about your way." And then she asked me. She said, "Well, my mom and dad are really mean to me." And I said, "Oh, that's sad." I said, "I had a dad that was kind of mean to me a little bit too." And then she started crying, and it was a fake cry. I could tell it was fake. And I felt her hand. She had her hand on my console, and her hand was really hot. I mean, burning hot. And I thought, "Oh, wow." I said, "Are you okay, Hiroko?" She goes, "Yes, I'm okay." I said, "You're burning hot." Daryl Sims, which is a famous implant guy, and he talks about humanoid ETs a lot. He told me, he said that she was practicing. She said she was eliciting emotional questions from you to learn how to be more emotional, and like us humans, they don't know emotions. They don't know human emotions, so they have to learn that from us. And as we were talking, this guy had pulled out, but he pulled back in again. And that's when I was starting to wonder what's going on with this guy. And I looked at her and I said, "Do you know him?" And she just looks at me. She goes, no. And I kept watching, and he didn't turn. He didn't turn at all. He didn't turn to us at all. I had a license to carry a gun, and I had one in my console. Well, I looked at my console, and she looked at me like she knew what was in that console, and she was telling me, "Peace out, don't do anything." And then her eyes pierced me, and I said, "Hiroko, your eyes are burning the back of my head." And she kind of looked down a little bit, and what she was telling me was, "Just be cool, just calm, don't do anything, don't grab a weapon, don't grab a flashlight, don't get out of the car and approach this guy." And so she was telling me, so I felt peaceful. And knowing my combat background, I probably would have been more on edge, and I probably would have went over to that guy and say, "What are you up to? What are you watching this for?" But I didn't do that because she made me kind of numb down a little bit, I guess, dumbed down with her energy. So we kept talking, and then I asked her how old she was, and she says, "Why you humans always talk about age and time?" She said, "There is no time. There is no age." I said, "Wow." I said, "Settle down." I thought, okay, wow. She really, really come on point at that point. And as we were doing that, that guy had left and then come back in again 3 times within an hour's time. And I thought, something's weird with this guy. And but she kept dumbing me down. And actually, when I turned to her one time, she shrank down in the seat. This is something I didn't think about until later on. Her body actually shrank down, like she was a little gray alien. And I think she was shape-shifting. She was a gray alien, but she shape-shifted into a human. And it's easier. Daryl Sims told me it's easier for them to shapeshift into an Asian person than anything else, because the gray, and they can shapeshift into a smaller Asian looking person. So I said, okay, it's not discriminating against Asians. I'm married to an Asian Filipino, so I don't discriminate. But she was smaller, and I was kind of so dumbed down that I didn't come on point about that issue looking at her. And I thought, my goodness, I said she got small, and I didn't think about it until afterwards. But then we kept talking. She tried to keep eliciting emotions from me. And this was about 8:30, 9 o'clock in the evening. It was getting dark. It was dark at that time. And this guy never came back after the 3rd time. And so after a few more questions that she asked me about, my sisters and brothers, how do I feel about them? And again, she's trying to elicit emotions from me and learn things. So I told her, I said, well, you want to have breakfast in the morning? I told her, I said, so we can take off and leave here. And she goes, sure. She said, I'll meet you. And I said, okay. And the 101, I guess, omelet place, it's called there. And it's one of the better restaurants in town there, and probably one of the better breakfast restaurants around. But so I took off and I followed her. I tried to follow her, and because she was going back to her lodge, I was going back to mine. And she was driving so fast that I didn't want to drive the speed that she was driving, because the cops would pick me up then. But I just turned off and I went back to my lodge. I went back to my legal notes. Of course, I was always prepared. I had cameras, and I had my laptop computer with me, and I took down a yellow notepad and I started taking notes on everything she said and done. And so the next morning, I got there to the 101 pancake place. It was about 9:15. We were supposed to meet there at 9:30, and she didn't show up at 9:30. And I thought, where's she at? I guess she's gonna blow me off. I said, no. So I got a message saying that she was coming. 10 minutes later, she arrived, and I looked at her and I said, I got your telepathic message. And she looked at me funny. I said, I knew you were coming, and so I waited here for you. And I said, did you check out of your room? She goes, yeah. I said, do you use a credit card? And she goes, yeah, but she acted like she didn't know what was going on. She had a handler that takes care of her. They usually come in threes. David Jacobs talks about this in his books, Dr. David Jacobs, that usually a hybrid alien or a shape-shifting alien will actually have a human handler and security with them as they go through their training methods and meet up with humans. Well, I told her, I said, did you check out? She goes, no. And I said, well, you need to check out, or they'll charge you another day on your credit card. And so I looked up her where she stayed, and I said, here, you can call them. She called them, and they said, yeah, you're okay, you're checked out. So somebody else checked her out of the room. They was in charge of her. And she said in her room, all she ate was like buns and donuts. And I heard that aliens like bread and things like that. They don't like to eat our other food, but they do like bread, and baked things, and that's what they feed on. And so we went in, and we were standing there in this little gift shop before you go into the restaurant, and we put her name on a waiting list. And she was standing there. There's only about 12 people in there, kind of wandering around in the gift shop. And she said, all these people. And I thought to myself, she told me she was from Tokyo, Japan. I mean, there's probably about 1,000 people per block in Tokyo, Japan, and why was she so alarmed with all these people, only 12 people? So all these red flags just jumped up, and it actually appeared that sometimes she would look different. I took 9 pictures of her, and in each picture, she kind of looks different, like her shape just a little bit different, but it's so similar that you can't notice unless you look at it real close. But we went in to eat, and I ordered things. She didn't know what to order, so I ordered stuff. She ate very little, and I ate mine, and we was there for about 40 minutes, and we got up, and I said, well, let's take a tour around the buttes and take a look at the mountains here. She goes, okay. And then she went to the bathroom, and I think what she did is regurgitated the food that she ate, because that's not the type of food that she eats. So she come back out, and then we took off and traveled around the buttes, and I give her water, but she didn't drink the water too much at all. And we just walked around to some of the buttes and looked up. And I told her, I said, well, you said another thing she said several times to me, she said she had to have a baby. She had to have a baby. She told me that 3 different times. And we were out looking at this butte, and it was really kind of like a nice breeze. And I told her, I said, let me hold your hand and we'll say a prayer. And I said a prayer for her to have her and her boyfriend get back together and have a baby. That's what she wanted. So I prayed for that. And then we took off. We went back to this restaurant. I said, well, you should have lunch before you leave, because she was going to leave about 3 o'clock that afternoon to go to Phoenix. And she said she had to catch a flight to LA. And I thought to myself, yeah, catch a flying saucer to LA, more than likely, So, so we went to this place for lunch, and it's kind of like a pizza place. So I ordered a couple of pizza, slices for each one of us, and a soda. And she looked at me and smiled and looked me right in the eyes, and she said, I like you. I said, I like you too, Hiroko, but I don't know who you are. And I said, you said you know who I am. She goes, yes. And I said, you want a baby, right? And she goes, yes, I want to have a baby. And I said, well, you should be married and see your boyfriend about that. And then I said, I like you too. But this is where I kind of felt that I did know her, DNA-wise. She was probably my daughter. She was, I was probably about 24 years older than her, and she was probably my daughter. And that's what a couple of psychics told me that too after I told them the story. And she felt like that. She felt like she was some kind of relation to me. So we got up and left, and then I took her back to her car, which was a rental car, and she told me, she said, would you please send me those pictures? She said, I'd love to have those pictures. I want those pictures. So we exchanged emails. I didn't exchange address. I had a kind of like a business card that had my name, phone number, and my email address. And that's about all it had. It didn't have my home address. I didn't usually give that out. So she didn't know my home address, but she got my email. I said, I'll send you an email with these 9 pictures. She said, okay. And then she took off. And then I went in and made more notes. And that day I left because it started raining a little bit more. And I just took off because Sedona is not so pretty when it rains. But to finish up that story, here's how I know that she was an ET. And a lot of people say, well, she could have been just, some 35-year-old Japanese gal just taking a tour and, by herself. And she actually said she went to White Sands, New Mexico, to visit the the base there. And I said, why'd you go there to do that? She said, I just wanted to see the sand. I said, by yourself, you know? So here's all these red flags just popping, you know? And but that's the other shoe fell, as we talk about in journalism. It fell about 5 months later. This was in October of 2010. And in March 17th, St. Paddy's Day, my cousin and I was sitting on my front porch, and this was in Illinois. And all of a sudden, these three showed up at the stop sign about 300 feet away where you get onto the 2-lane road. And there was three individuals standing there, two young men and a woman. And my cousin said, do you know those Chinese? I said, no, they're not Chinese, they're Japanese. And he said, do you know them? We were sitting on the front porch smoking cigars, which I had to give up anyway. So that was a long time ago, 2011, March 17th. It was a nice sunny day, nice weather. We sat on the porch, and him and I were just, you know, BSing and talking like we normally do. And they started walking towards us. And at this point, they were about maybe 250 feet away. And then when they got in a little closer, the female, Hiroko, in which I knew exactly who it was because her hair was the same length. She wore the same clothes, a real slim, white. It was a sweater and then her denim pants. And I said, I think I know who the woman is. I told my cousin. He said, who is it? I said, somebody I met 5 months ago. Her name's Hiroko. And the two young boys approached us. They stood about 10 feet away from us, standing in my driveway. They were dressed as normal teens would dress, kind of mod. And they looked at me. The taller one did. They looked like they were 16 and 15 years of age. The taller one looked like he was a year or so older than the other one. And the tall one looked at me and he says, where is the new Walmart? And I said, that's a strange question. I didn't say that, but I thought it. And I said, it's right over this overpass. I said, about a quarter mile down. And he said, it was okay. And then after that, I couldn't talk. My cousin and I both were dumbed down. We couldn't talk. They must have hit us with some kind of magnetic energy. And my cousin was looking down at the floor. His eyes were all glassy. He usually talks a lot, too much sometimes. He gets to be rude. And I thought, oh, what happened to him? And I thought to myself, well, I can't talk either. I tried to talk to those two boys. I said, I wanted to say, is that Hiroko? And they knew, they read my mind. They knew what I was thinking, but I couldn't talk. My tongue couldn't move. I couldn't talk. All I could do was look and see.
Wow.
And they controlled everything, or they controlled where we looked, and we couldn't talk. So and actually the taller one went in my house. I didn't even know it. The door was right to my right-hand side. And he went in my house and he come out with my brown attaché case. I call it it's a pleather case. It was kind of like vinyl. I keep my notes in it to keep it dry from rain or anything. And so he was looking in that case and looking at me, giving me a real dirty look. And he knew there were notes in there about his mother. Now I'm thinking she was the mother. These two were her offspring, DNA. They're hybrids. And then I thought, okay, he's looking in that case. And then he walked past me again because I found my case. I didn't think to look for it until about 3 hours later when I finally start not being so numb. And I found the case that he went back in the house and I didn't even realize he went past me and then come back out. Well, they were standing there and then they turned and started walking away. And when they got across my street right in front of my yard, when they got across, I started coming to pretty well. And then I could see and I could talk. And then my cousin was still kind of dumbed down. And then about 5-10 seconds later, he shook his head. He said, what the hell just happened? I said, I'll tell you. I said, let's watch where we're going and what they're going to do. So they walked up to Hiroko. She was midway to the road. And they joined with her. And then they walked up to the stop sign. And I told my cousin, let's watch where they go. They didn't come in a car. We didn't see them walk up or down the road. And when they left, they must have just been teleported up because they were gone in a flash. We didn't see them walk up or down. My cousin said, what the hell is going on? He said, did you see them leave? I said, no, we were both watching. They just disappeared. They were gone. And we could see the road up and down. And we thought, well, they weren't walking. They didn't have a car. And he said, this is crazy. He said a few cuss words to me. He said, these aliens are going to kill you one of these days, Dave. And I said, well, they haven't yet. I said, I've run into them a few times. They haven't killed me yet. He said, this is crazy. He got in this truck and he took off, and he was just pale white. His wife asked me the next day, what did you do to Ron? I said, look, I didn't do nothing. I said, the ETs did. She said, ETs? I said, yeah, extraterrestrials. They visited my house. And that's what spooked him out. You know, what went on. Him being dumbed down, couldn't talk, and then they disappeared out of the middle of nowhere. And she goes, oh, really? I said, yeah. So I said, that's why your husband's so shook up. I said, but no, he was my witness. And I've had witnesses on half of my experiences. But a lot of times you don't have witnesses because you don't know when things are going to happen. You know, it just happens when it happens.
What was Haruko's accent like, her voice? When you were talking to her, did she have like a sort of broken American English accent?
No.
Did she sound like she was Japanese or Oriental?
No, she talked pure English. She was,
Wow. So that almost
and I find it interesting that you say like she knew these languages but couldn't read it but could speak it.
Right. Mm-hmm. Well, English, she said she couldn't read because if somebody reads symbols like Japanese or Chinese, they write symbols for their writing. So if there wasn't any symbols there, she couldn't understand them. She couldn't understand the English, script. So yeah.
I wonder what the other languages were.
I don't. She didn't really say. I didn't talk to her about that. I just was more curious about her personally, and I asked her why she had to have a baby. This was in the car, and she said, "I just do. I gotta have." I said, "Well, you're not that old yet. You're not to worry about it." I said, "You're still, and that's where the age thing come up, and that's where she come on point. But I found out why she had to have a baby. I felt those two young boys were part of my DNA. Their face structures were kind of like mine. They weren't like the round face usually the Japanese have. They had some bone structures in their chin and up here in their cheek area, and I thought, well, they kind of looked a little different. They did look Japanese, but what happened? I had a regressed dream a little bit after that second run-in, and I was back in the lodge room. It was room number 14, and I was laying in bed, and I was laying on the side of the second bed closest to the restroom, and I felt something going on, and I looked down and I saw a brown hose going towards my groin area. And they had my right knee up, and I saw somebody manipulating. It was a kind of a dark shadow, and I tried to kick it away with my knee. And when I did, they knocked me completely out. I was out, but they messed up a little bit. They got me up, I guess, to erase my memory. And how they erase your memory is it's a bright light. It's about 6-7 inches long. It looks like a fluorescent tube, except it's it's smaller and really bright and intense. And they got me up and walked me. One had my arm on one side and the other one the other, and that the one was on my right side was shining the light in my face and go up and down my face and in my eyes. It was so bright it hurt my eyes. And I was walking towards the patio doors, which was the doors to my room, and they kept doing that. But I saw a silhouette of two people sitting at this little table. In a lodge or a motel, you got a table and 2 chairs, 3 chairs. They were sitting there, 2 of them sitting there, and there was 2 that was handling me, I guess, walking me back and forth, holding this light in my face. And I thought, what's this all about? This was in a dream, and I didn't figure it out until later. Is that if you're laying down, it's going to be hard for you to open your eyes. They would have a difficult time keeping your eyes open, so they walked me. So when you walk, you're going to open your eyes automatically. That's why they did it walking me, because they can get the light in there better and erase my memory. But they didn't erase all of it. I remember that part of it. The next following year, I went back to the same room. I took pictures and videos of my walk back and forth. And when I replayed it, I said, "Oh my God, that was it. That's what happened." I replayed that whole scene, and I said, "Yes, that's exactly what happened." I saw the dark figures on the right-hand side, patio doors, and I walked past the 2 beds, and they walked me back a couple of times. And I said, that's what happened. So it was a regress dream that proved that point. And the baby that she's talking about was apparently when they took the semen samples from me in the room with that hose, that light brown tan hose, they can trigger something and get the semen through that semen sampler. And so they had semen samples, and she was probably wanting another child that was from my semen samples for the other two teenagers. So that's what I had figured out. I mean, people might think I'm crazy, but I'm too old to be worried about what people think anymore. I don't care. I wrote my book to say, hey, world, this happens, this is going on, and this is what's going on all the time. We don't even realize it.
Right. And I find it interesting that you're saying, she's talking about having a kid. 5 months later, shows up with two, and then you remember, then they trigger your memory and regress and show you that incident that, like she was saying, what is time? Of going, yeah, time for us is different for them. And
Right.
I'm wondering if she was showing you, hey, here are the two that are from that incident 5 months ago, and this is how our time works.
Well, it could be they could speed up time and people grow faster or get older faster. But here's what happened in 95. In 1995, this is how this story kind of connects. You take 95 and then you take 2010, that's about 15 years. And that's long enough for these two teenagers to be 16 and 15 or 14 or whatever. I don't know exactly what age they were. They looked about 15, 14, 16, somewhere in there. But back in 95, it was about 3 o'clock in the morning. And my ex-wife, she liked the room dark. She put a blanket over the window, and she liked it really dark. So at 3 o'clock, I woke up and I saw a reflection in the mirror, the dresser mirror. I thought it was my daughter coming in for aspirins for a headache in our bathroom, our master bathroom. And she and I got my chin in my right palm and I held it up and I looked and I said, I called her name out 3 times. She didn't answer. I said, that's weird. And then this dark figure come around my bed to my side. So I changed positions in my left hand and I looked up. I thought it was going to be her just saying, I'm going to get some aspirins, but it wasn't. When I looked, this little critter was about 3.5 feet tall and he had big eyes. He didn't have the black lenses on. I could see the white of his pupils and everything. And I could see that he, I couldn't see the color of his eyes, but I could see the white pupils. And he had a little bit bigger eyes than us, and they kind of slanted up a little bit. And he was like a gray, like they typically talk about the eyes, but the face was so wrinkled. I mean, it was really like a prune. And it's not like the commercial little gray that you see, real smooth and everything. This thing was really, really, crinkled up and wrinkled. You can put a credit card in the slots where it's so wrinkled, and it was ugly. And I looked at it and I had fear for about 5 to 7 seconds, and then all of a sudden I fell back asleep. But I didn't go back to sleep. He put me back to sleep, and apparently he must have took DNA and semen samples from me, and this is where she got those 2 boys from that incident. That I'm putting that together. I woke up, it was about an hour later, and I woke up and my eyes were just blinking real fast like a nervous tick. And I said, wow, I can't stop them from blinking. I asked my wife, said, do you see or hear anything? She goes, no, go back to sleep. So I went in the bathroom, splashed my face with cold water, and I still couldn't get the blinking. I said, oh my God, this is terrible. I said, what was that thing? I said, it just follows the path of some of my, other things that, that I had, other experiences that I had, it all kind of ties together. And I had to go to work early that morning, 6 o'clock. So I stayed up from 4 to 6 just watching TV, trying to calm down. I just could, it was just a freaky thing that really hyped me up so bad I couldn't go back to sleep anyway. So yeah, that was the one that I looked right in the face, and he was a little gray. And that kind of fit the scheme of things, or the timeline. from 95 until about 2010. And so that kind of fit that timeline.
Do you think you've got any sort of strange implants since those abductions? Have you noticed anything?
Yes, I've had one when I was 14, when my friend and I saw my first UFO. Actually, I saw a UFO a year before that, and it was kind of hard to explain. It was kind of like mystical in a way. I was sitting out in the backyard, and my other brothers and sisters were in the house, and I saw this object that was rectangular in shape, looked like a small barge, river barge, and underneath of it had a glowing blue light, just kind of flashing and glowing underneath, and in front of it had two lights, streaming out. And I looked up and I thought, what is this? It kind of scared me. I was only 13 at the time. This was in '62. And a year later, I saw the other one up close with my friend. And I looked at it, and then I don't remember anything after that. I ended up in bed. My legs were numb, and I felt somebody standing next to me. And I shared a bed with my older brother. And I asked him, I said, do you see or hear anything? He goes, no, go to bed. And then the object that was standing beside me disappeared and was gone. And my legs, I could move my legs again. I don't know if I was carried into that bed or how I did it with all the people that I lived with at the time, 10 brothers and sisters. And well, I might have had 8 brothers and sisters at that time. But I remember that in a kind of a vague sense. But the year later, this was my first actual sighting where I was conscious enough to know what everything went on. My buddy and I were sitting on his steps, and his dad and him and his dad lived in an apartment downstairs in this house, and we were sitting on the steps on the outside of his apartment, and we first heard snapping and popping of the radio. I asked him, did you change the batteries of the radio? And he said, yes, I did. And then we smelled something that smelled like a sulfur smell. Actually, now that what I know of it, ozone smell is what it was actually. And we looked up and we saw these lights. There was like 3 little lights that was glimmering through the tops of the treetops where the leaves were at. This was summertime after we had a summer break from school. And I was 14 at the time and he was 13. And so he said, let's go to my dad's truck and get the flashlight. So we went up there, and he said, let's follow it. And I said, yeah, let's follow it. So we followed it. It was moving real slow across our neighborhood. There's 2 streets. My street was just opposite of his street, but not very far away. And then we walked up his road, and we watched this thing. We got in this empty lot. Actually, this craft actually was about only 35, 40 feet in the air, and it was over my backyard. It looked like it was 35 feet wide, about maybe 22, 23 feet wide, and it had 3 like round body, like an old top, like you wind up an old top. It had 3 like round piled on, like it had a top on it, and then another area where it had the portals and windows. And then at the bottom, it looked like it was just pure solid. And underneath the side was dark, black. I couldn't see anything. But we saw movement in the portals. There was windows in the second level, in between level. And there was some shadows moving around. And so my buddy kind of nudged me. He said, you see that? And I said, yeah. I said, I don't want to see him. I said, it's kind of like when you go to a horror movie and you're a kid, you actually don't want to see the monster, but you really do. To find out what it looks like. So I was standing and said, I don't want to see him. I said, this is scary. So, and then we pinched each other, make sure we wasn't dreaming. And he hurt when he pinched me so hard, it hurt. And I said, wow, that hurt. And he said, well, I got to make sure we're not dreaming. I said, we're not dreaming. I said, this is real. I said, we're awake. And we were standing together. And then after that, we don't remember much. We don't know about what time it was. I think it started after 10 o'clock, maybe between 10 and 10:30, but we're not really sure. We know it was dark time, and we ended up standing in that vacant lot, and then I remember seeing this thing shooting straight off to the west. When we first saw it, I went back later, some years ago, and I looked at the angle. We were looking at this thing in the southwest, looking due southwest, but when it took off, it took off due west. So that means that it moved about 30, 40 degrees, and we didn't see it move because we did not see it move when it just stationary. So I thought it moved, and while we were on that UFO, and so we went to our respective homes, and my buddy said, "I'm gonna go tell my dad." He goes, tells his dad, "Dad, I just saw a flying saucer," and he said, "Yes, son. Yeah, sure you did. Now go to bed." And when I got home, my mom had the door locked, and she had to unlock the door. And she goes, "Do you know what time it is?" And she thought I was going to stay all night with my friend at his apartment. And she said, "You know what time it is?" I said, "No, but I wish she would have told me. I wish she would have told me what time it was." And she said, "I saw a flying saucer, Mom." She goes, "I'll fly and saucer your butt and I'll get in the house." And so that was it of that, So I wish she would have told me what time it was. That's one thing I missed. Yeah.
Do you think you were missing time during that experience?
Yes. I had a regress dream. It took several years to have this regress dream. And it's weird that things will come back to you even years later. Well, I had a dream that I was on board this ship. I was on a metal table. I was sitting there. I was trying to button my shirt, but the shirt was too small. I was kind of a chubby guy as compared to my friend who was a little thinner than me. And I felt the heat. It was kind of dark and hot in that room, but I felt my friend's presence. He must have been just a little ways away from me because I felt that he was in the room with me. I didn't see him, but I felt his presence. But I couldn't get the shirt button; it was too small. So they got our shirts mixed up when they had us, dress up again. They had our shirts mixed up. So and then I finally, I guess, apparently got the right shirt, and they put us back down on that lot. And so I told him, I said, "Do you remember that?" He doesn't have a recollection of being on that ship, but I do. I remember that. My brother keeps telling me he doesn't have the consciousness and he doesn't think about opening his mind up to all those possibilities. He did see the craft, and he goes along with me. I got him in the book, that he saw this. We saw it together, and but he was listening for sound, and I was looking at the windows and the shadows. But he said he heard a hissing sound. I didn't hear it. He said he heard a hissing sound. You take two people, and they'll pay attention to certain things in a experience or a happening. So, but he didn't experience that being on the ship, and I did. I said, "Well, we were abducted. That's why we were late getting home. That's why my mom chewed me out, because we wouldn't have been late if it hadn't been for that." I said, "We were on board that ship," and so I got an implant. 2 weeks later, after that event, in my left testicle, I felt a lump, and I thought, "Well, what's going on here?" And I looked down, and there was a cut line. It was a red line, like a laser line. I know it now as a laser line. So I took that little bump and I pushed it out of that same laser line. It did not bleed. wasn't a drop of blood, and it didn't hurt too bad. I got it out of my hand, and I looked, and it closed back up, and it was sealed, the red line. And then I got it out of my hand. It looked like a little Advil or a little M&M, and it was ash color, light color. And then as I held it out, it started getting darker because of the oxygen was getting to it. I showed it to my mom, and she goes, "What is that?" I said, "I got it out of back then I said the word right out, but out of my left testicle." And she goes, "That's an ingrown hair." She said, "Throw it away." I said, "No, Mom, it's not an ingrown hair." She said, "What do you mean?" I said, "There was a red line that was cut." I said, "It was about an inch long. It's red." And I said, "It was cut." And I said, "I took it back out of that thin red line. It had an opening to it." And she looked at me kind of weird, and she was dumbfounded. She didn't know what to say. She said, "Throw it away anyway." So I did. So that concluded. That was I guess the third foot that fell after regress dream, and then that implant. So that confirmed.
When you showed your mother that implant, she'd already had ET abduction experiences before you showed her that?
She had sightings of flying saucers. She didn't start having ET experiences until later on, but her and her family they've seen flying saucers. Yes.
So Dave, we're approaching the top of the hour.
Okay.
Do you have time I have one quick question I want to ask you.
Sure.
And before I ask it, I just want to say thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And now my question is, while you were in the service, were you getting any abductions or UFO sightings, or did they leave you alone while you were in the service?
Well, while I was in service, I went into top secret work at Redstone Arsenal. I was training in nuclear weapons, and which I didn't like. So I got out of that. A lot of people say, well, how'd you get out of a top secret? I waited 6 months to get it, but I was in top secret, and this is where maybe the ETs might have found out my name. They might have, they knew where I was at, located me from 1963 and 1964. They probably kept track of me from that, but I got out of it because I didn't like it. I didn't like military intelligence interviewing me every week, myself and the other classmates. I was the only high school person in that class. The rest of them had bachelor's and master's in mathematics, and they were into this thing. And I had an 89% average, so I couldn't drop out. I had to go to the post chaplain to get out of that class. But when I got out of that class, I was a free agent. I wasn't contracted anymore for any schooling. So I ended up going to Vietnam for my brother. His wife was pregnant, and I was still single, so I went to Vietnam instead of him. And I turned out to be a combat sergeant, had a platoon, and months later, after I got back, they offered me a commission in that. So, yeah, that was part of my upbringing, I guess you could call.
Cool.
Yeah.
So where can people find you and your books?
Well, they can find me on Amazon and Kindle, and my publisher has other outlets too. You can find, I think, Hoku, something like that, and there's a couple others that my publisher just started reaching out and putting them out on different platforms. But you can look me up in Google and find almost anything, even my shows and all this other stuff. And so you can find out a lot about me on Google. I imagine a lot of people that I don't want to know what's going on are looking me up on Google. But no, Amazon and Kindle, you can look me up. And I'm on Facebook. I got shows on YouTube, Rumble, and look up Dave Emmons, UFO abductions, and you'll find anything you're looking for.
Brilliant. Yeah, thank you, Dave. It's been a really good show tonight. Really enjoyed it.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
No problem.
We hope you'll come back on another time.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be nice to. I know Kell had quite a few questions for you, so it's a shame she's not around.
Yeah.
So
right.
Maybe a day. Yeah, that'll be good.
Ready. Thank you.
Right. So who's going to close out today then, Michael?
Well, I'll say thank you to everyone in the chat room. Thank you, Matt and Dave, for a fun episode.
Thank you.
And one thing I'm kind of curious on, Dave, is what is one nugget that you would like to leave with people?
That they're real. Angels are real. ETs are real. UFOs are definitely real. It's all real. We don't know anything. After all the research and things that I've been through, I still don't know exactly who they are, what they are, but they've been in my house. I've got videos, I've got pictures of things that are strange. And so they're around us. They can be invisible in your house, and you might think they're poltergeists, but actually there could be an ET that's just invisible. So yeah, if I have to leave people with something, that these ETs are, they could be ghosts, they could be poltergeists, they could act like, they can do anything. They also can get into your mind, and you can have regressed dreams or lucid dreams that they put in your mind. They can control us. They're controlling us now. I think there's 2 or 3 evil entities like reptilians that are actually controlling the underground, and also all big top political figures. That's all they are, is figures. There's other people running this world, and the ETs might be part of it.
Mm.
Very true. I feel like, yeah, there's a lot of truth in that. So, well, thank you, and thank you, everyone, and join us next week as we'll be back with another exciting episode of Paranormal Versus. And so with that, we are going to say good night, good day, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Make it a great one. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Bye.